guys, welcome back to The Wolf and the Bear. Okay, so I wanted to sort of have a moment to give an update as far as just Terri and her shoulder. So her surgery went really, really well. And now she's kind of just in that recovery phase where everything hurts and it kind of sucks. Actually, it sucks a lot. But she is on her way to being brand new on the right shoulder. Right shoulder? Yeah, it is on the right side. Oh, and it's just been, I don't know, I can't even imagine that level of pain and discomfort. She's doing very well, and she'll be back with us shortly. I've just been like, who's gonna ask someone to podcast when it's just like pain and So she'll be back soon, but thankfully everything went perfectly to plan and no complications. Just the recovery process is very painful. Okay. Oh, and the other thing is, I do have, so I am continuing as well to do the every other Wednesday, if you're in the DFW area, for sort of like a support group for anyone who's kind of having a hard time, which it's a very complicated time right now, energetically, spiritually, y'all see it. We're in the same reality. It's very, very strange. It's hard to do it right now. So we sort of are gathering to kind of lay our problems on the table, so to speak, to get a sort of a different perspective with the guides and kind of help understand how we can walk our independent paths forward towards like dialing in who we actually are, what it means to live authentically, and kind of the process they're in. So what we're going to be meeting tomorrow night, which is right now it's the 25th, so it'll be the 26th. So it's every other Wednesday, but please come join also. Terri does have her channeling class that will be back, and I believe it is Thursday, the 6th is when she'll be back. So yay! Everyone's kind of moving and grooving and doing our best. But now with that kind of over and out of the way, I sort of wanted to talk about and felt very led to discuss the topic around like sort of the process of manifestation. And we covered this kind of in the last class of Dark Night of the Soul Anonymous. So now that that's sort of out there for those that were there, I kind of want to cover some of the things that were discussed in that class. And one of the things that was sort of brought up by the guides or by, with that collective co-creative energy we had that night, the topic kind of became understanding and delineating the difference between the mind that we have at a conscious level and the mind or the version of us that sits outside of reality as we know it. And what I really mean by that is reality from the perspective of, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I have a cat and he's being very in the way if you're watching this at all. Okay, cool. So, we have what our mind right now, which sort of collects data, right? It is through our observations that we have context for our experience. So the brain, right, the thing that we use to contextualize and understand is what I would perceive as the conscious mind. And the conscious mind has one driver, and is to identify what the nature of what is in front of me, what am I experiencing, what is the reality I see. Just it's understanding and categorizing based on past experiences. So that's where you kind of get history and old belief systems, all that. But at the end of the day, the brain that we have that we consider the conscious mind. But we have another mind or another aspect of our soul, another thinking entity, organizing entity that we would probably classify as the higher mind. And some could maybe make an argument as far as this being a version of the higher self, right? And what we're really looking at is we're looking at an invested aspect of ourself that sits outside of time and space. And what does that mean, right? Like that's a huge statement. Something that's part of us that sits outside of time and space. when our reality is locked in, bookended by time and space. I can't just wish I was in Kentucky right now, right? I'm locked by the dynamics of it would take me X amount of feet to travel to get there. So I'm limited by space. And then obviously time. I can't just make it happen tomorrow. Even if I could traverse all of the space, there's the time that also logs that experience. So what's the value of something that sits outside of time and space? And what is the value of it being a version of us, right? Well, the way that it sort of is described to me, the most simplistic way that the guides kind of break it down is this. If our brain that sits inside of our body, that kind of sits within our conscious state of being in the here and now, right? Kind of disconnected from soul connection, very, very individuated. So that's one version of the brain. But we go into, think about like, when we were if you had any type of organized religion as a growing up, and there's a version of it that's like, hey, dear God, I know that you have war and famine to deal with, but my dog is sick, can you please help? Right? And that is kind of like the joke always. But in our reality, through divine right, so call that God, call that whatever you want to call it, but through the laws that exist that are immutable, whether you want to acknowledge that they're not, is this. It is that there is a version of something sentient that answers that call. Well, who then will work on our behalf to help our dog who's sick? Because we're locked in by time and space. Time from the perspective of, I don't really like, how much time do I have to fix this problem? Based on the health of a biological individual, a soul, an animal. Like, you can't wait 8 million years if there's a sickness in the here and now. And space, like, how do I bring the space of health where they are in a healthy state closer to, or in place of, a version of reality where they're unwell? So then you have that higher mind, or the higher self, whatever you want to call it. And they are the ones, it is the one that is the entity of our soul that is most appropriate to deal with the how and the why. But how often do we spend all of our time and energy trying to figure out, well, here's the what, right? The what is, my reality is undesirable. I'm not happy. Something about it is making me unhappy. It's making me depressed. Cool. How do I get to a spot that is not that way? Why did this blow up happen in the last couple of months? And then why did, the blow up happen in 6 months, right? All the things that our human mind would like to know. How do we make it perfect for the journey forward? And why did any of this happen? But the reality is, the brain that would be asking that question for us has zero capability of gauging either of those questions well. How to make it happen, why anything has happened or will happen. But when you go into the higher self that sits outside of time and space, therein lies the entity or the energy or the correct vibrational frequency to concern itself with the how when it comes to be true that your soul desires a certain outcome. So the true reality of it seems to be that our conscious mind, for instance, me, Sophia Sterling, the version of myself that identifies myself as that name, with all of the components that make me me, I have one job. I have a job to understand what is the truth of my reality, and through that truth, identify, what do I want? What do I desire? What is the thing that is most exciting? What is the thing that essentially makes my soul, my energy, sing regardless of what I think? There's some topics that are very true to our energy that are just in complete excitement when we engage in them or when we think about them. What are those things? That's what we're supposed to find out. All we have to do identify what is the truth of our reality, i.e., what is real, what needs to change, what can stay, a constant sort of pruning of our reality, understanding, right? And then the idea and the arrogance to understand what's in front of us in the here and now and say, well, but what I want out of the future is this, right? That's the paperwork. That's the form. What's the reality now? Is it a good fit or not? Is it where you want to be or not? Is it, does it need to be adjusted or not? And then what do you want? If you know it needs to be adjusted, what is not in alignment with your highest excitement and what needs to change? What needs more of your energy? What needs less, right? All of it is just what. Fill out that paperwork with yourself, with your soul, right? With your self-understanding, right? And then the next stage of manifestation is the hardest part. It is where you have to let it go. You cannot sit here and fixate on how it happens or why. How, for instance, okay, I've gotten so real with myself that even though, for instance, say I come from, and I'm making this up, but say I come from a finance family background and everything about my existence says I should be pursuing that industry. That's what I have shoes into. I could always be successful there, but my soul's dying. I'm depressed. I'm angry. I'm very good at what I do, but it's not doing anything for me. And something's got to give because I'm thinking about burning it all down, right? That's kind of the sequence of thoughts that sort of happens sometimes. Okay, well, then maybe come to find through self-discovery, through self-honesty, you come to find that really what you'd like to do is be a park ranger. And you've dreamed about it when you were a kid. You remember thinking about Smokey the Bear, and then all of that got sidetracked because of the family stuff. Well, now you're 40 and now you're realizing I'm deeply depressed. Nothing's working. I hate finance, whatever. Recognize that once you start asking yourself, help me understand what my soul wants to do, and then allowing there to be space for that thought form to breathe, to develop, to come into focus, and then to be able to listen. Because if you're making, imagine you're making 200 grand a year and your soul, how inconvenient, your soul starts to say, oh, we're not happy. Like, not only are we not happy, but the requirement for us to be happy means dropping your income by like a dramatic amount. Nobody in the Western world, and that's where I'm used to, but I'm not sure how many aspects of the world that would be particularly open to saying, I'm going to abdicate a lot of financial wellness for soul or spirit wellness. It's not really something we would probably do. But yet, if you come to find that your reality is that awful, that you find that your reality is something that is generating more pain and frustration and sadness than anything else, recognize that through asking the universe, your soul, God, Earth, Gaia, elemental energies, ask, it doesn't, ask your own guides, like, right? What is it my soul is needing? And then not expecting an answer and allowing that answer to come to you, that will be everything. And that will change everything, because it will start to get, like, the guides will never assault you with, not only are you in the wrong industry, but like your life is gonna have to change 800 different ways. It doesn't start that way. You start to get an understanding of, out of nowhere, I'm starting to kind of have an insight on this friend. And oddly, now when I think about it, this friend never supports me. And this friend maybe never really makes me feel like I can do it. And that's the first thing you start to notice. That's the smallest thing that the universe brings to you to have you make a choice on, because that's all the universe can do. You still have free will. You still have to be in the driver's seat. But when you start asking the universe, what do I need? What is the next step? What do I do? How do I prune this rose bush that I recognize some parts are not doing well for me and some parts are? I need to salvage what's working and discard what's not. You'll usually not find this huge aha moment. You'll find an awareness that's usually uncomfortable, because if it were comfortable and easy, you wouldn't have struggled to do it by now. So something will begin to emerge. that creates and causes discomfort and an inkling of dis-ease. And whenever that happens, what it really is doing is it's shining a spotlight on it. The faster that you make a decision about whatever is being shown a spotlight, the less dis-ease you deal with. I know that sounds like that is the fastest way through anxiety and depression, is making choices. That's the hardest part. That's what gets us into paralysis. That's what gets us into non-movement. It's an accumulation of decisions that we already know are hard to make. Thus, we don't want to make them. Thus, we don't make them. So then they just start piling up, and our timelines become essentially locked because they require if-thens, right? And if you've made no choices, there is no thens, right? So you kind of just exist in this, like, responding to the waves of your existence because you're not choosing anything. You're not taking action until you begin the process of taking action and it translating your physical energy into reverberated waves, i.e., when I send on a resume, that puts out my energy into the universe, that has to go out and be responded to and get back to me as a yes or no. Do you get the interview or not? Right. But through that action, I become a player, right? Momentum occurs, movement occurs, a yes or no, a step forward or a step back, or not a step at all, right? But if I don't step at all, nothing can make me do so. And it's it's a very risky idea to simply give it up to the universe to bring it to you, given the fact that every time you make a decision, and through a decision, a preference, and through a preference, you send out a vote into the future, there are plenty of people who are doing that. Of the population, I would say it's probably 10%. But if you choose to enter that 10%, recognize that it doesn't just mean you're going to get what you want. It just means that you are now in competition with only the other 10%, which is a lot less than the rest of the world. The rest of the world has a tendency to be very unconscious and very responsive. So if you say, I want that corner shop, then you're only competing with the other people that want that corner shop, right? So your vitality and the energy behind your desire and the energy required to manifest that, it is only being placed in competition with, because there's only one spot, right? Only one person can get that location at a time, right? It's a commodity. When we get so arrogant as to say we would like a commodity, whether that's a spot on the corner store, whether that's a partition of other people's money through a resource that other people, like if you're in massage, well, a lot of people are, but you're arguing that you want people's resources above other people in fair trade for your service. Well, that's kind of arrogant, right? So how does the universe conspire for you instead of the other people that want it? Well, part of that is maintaining your vitality, which I've talked about in different episodes. If I say, I put up my, bidding card essentially, right, saying I want it, but I've done 0% of energy conservation. My work and my home life is terrible, so I'm hemorrhaging energy all the time there. And I also am lying a lot, so I have no real identification with who I actually am. And maybe I even have shame and guilt about who I am. So imagine what that looks like in spirit. It looks like someone just feebly, like with shaking arms, raising a bid card that may or may not even be seen or acted upon, versus somebody who is very authentic, is in a position where their environment supports who they are and is very much in alignment with who they are, even if that means they're lonely. At least means that they're not hemorrhaging energy to a reality that is not real, i.e., acting like something they're not, maintaining relationships that don't really serve them, whatever the case may be. When you have somebody like that who is also putting a bid card, their arm is very strong. They have no weaknesses in spirit. So they say, I put my card up, I want that spot. Well, that's going to get seen. That's going to be acted upon. That's going to be fleshed out faster and more aggressively by the energy, the soul energy to create that someone like that has over someone who's saying, I want that spot on the corner. but I have no life energy to give to that thought because I spend it all trying to exist in my relationship, exist with my kids, exist in my job. Like I have nothing left to give. So, that vote, while it's the same idea, I would like the bid on that corner spot. If it's not predestined in contracts or any other version of things that would maybe give you a leg up, and it's just based on your vitality, you better hope that you've preserved and engaged in the right level of vitality so that you can get a response from the universe that is in alignment with the arrogance that goes with saying, I want something out of the universe crafted in my design, right? We can all sit there and wait for, what does the universe give us? How do we respond? It's very arrogant and very beautifully arrogant to say, not only do I understand that I have to deal with and surf within the currents that I don't start, but in the face of this current system that I don't start, I also plan to start a current. I also plan to set out motion. And Lord help the people that are in the wake of that, So all of that to say, there's a recognition around creation, around the energy of creation, right? And getting into position to really manifest, to really bring about from existence something that vaguely symbolizes what you would prefer. That's all manifestation is. The stuff that comes regardless is the contracts and karma. It's like, if you have a contract to fail miserably, through no matter how much you want to manifest, no matter how strong your manifestation is, if it's in your contracts that you have to endure the process of catastrophic failure so that you experience the process of pure underdog rebuild, then that's the reality. You can't out manifest that. But in the event, and again, that's a why, right? And remember, our conscious mind is not, we can't ever know why. So we could sit there and say, well, the reason that we failed miserably is because our vitality wasn't what it was. But what if the why actually is you had a contract to do that? You had a desire to go and experience losing everything to then begin again, right? That's what you desire to experience. That's the contract that you had. Or what if that experience is because you had a lack of action? That maybe you were set up for success, but through your lack of action and your lack of sitting in the driver's seat, you lost that opportunity. Well, there isn't really a way to know why from a conscious state. You could go into meditation, you go into the higher self and get some answers, but not in our current physical human experience that we're not allowed to know. So if we're not allowed to know why, we must then presume that it's not really important to categorize on importance, future events or past, right? It means that if we can't know why, it's not important to know why. Because if it was important to know why, we would be able to. But that's not what our mind is able to access information to do, right? That is only accessible from the higher self. That's only accessible from energy that is not encapsulated in an ego that's locked into time and space. So then if we can't know why, would not it make sense to bank on yourself and what you want, even if it's wrong, even if it's not really in alignment with your soul, in the moment you think you want it? Guess what? I promise you, there is as much such thing as a positive synchronicity as there is a negative synchronicity. A prime example would be you're starting to date somebody new, but every single time you go over to hang out with them, something horrible happens and you're always delayed. That's a negative synchronicity. That might be a sign that every time you try to go see this person, it never works out smoothly. How interesting, because you would also be saying, if you were seeing someone, that, oh my gosh, every time it just happens so easy. Well, we're more likely to tell our girlfriends about that than we are to acknowledge that, hey, we really would like this person to like us and we like them. But every single time we try, it seems there's something else that just gets in the way. Why are we only able to listen to the positive synchronicities, right? Why don't we listen whenever it seems very arduous to pursue something to know, right? If it is for you, if it is in alignment with your soul, there's a flow that happens, and there's a natural kind of excitement and a lack of ability to set it down. And it's kind of this more healthy version of obsession. Because obsession can be like an anxious obsession. We've all had it probably, right? But there's a peace and a certainty that comes with, hey, I'm not really sure this is like my soul calling. But when I asked the question of what I think it might be, this is what landed. So I guess we'll find out, right? Because isn't that a more worthwhile investment than sitting and waiting to respond to other people's waves and desires, or to go with something that might seem safe? But if you're already asking yourself, is this just a safe option? It means that there's a version of yourself that believes that might be true, which means that there's a version of yourself that believes there is something else to look at, right? Nobody who is in the middle of living their best life in their highest fulfillment is asking the question of, am I fulfilled? Right? That's not the question you ask. So, and I want to sort of give examples of that, because it doesn't really translate when it comes down to like careers. That's what I see the most in the work that I do. So, think about this as far as the actual archetypes I see a lot around, like, when you think of, okay, well, I know what I'm doing isn't working for me, but I don't really know what will. And maybe I'm very comfortable with my income. I don't know, like some version where you don't really have to make a change, but you know that your soul's decaying. Okay. So there are those that pursue knowledge, and they are kept well and whole and fulfilled when they're learning something new all the time. So what that really has a tendency to translate to is the interest is learning something new. The evolved version of fulfillment of that is learning what you learn, like collecting information as you learn it and then teaching it, right? So the student always has the final form as the teacher. So if you find that you are that type to always adore, always, doesn't matter what, you're always trying to learn something new, recognize that your fulfillment will be within the scope of teaching. You just have to figure out to what degree, to what, like if you work a finance job that has no teaching, that means you have to go find something in your personal life and find an outlet to that. Because it doesn't always mean shift the way you make money. It just means maybe you need to add or integrate a way to spend your time that is fulfilling. Okay. So don't get me wrong here. Another version is, for instance, helping other people, right? Intellectually or emotionally. That might be different for people. Being in service. What does that mean? Like maybe you don't want to hear about people's problems, but you will spend 12 hours a day at a soup kitchen. They're very different ways of giving back. And they're very different ways of harnessing the way that that's fulfilling. So, knowing exactly how you're being fed is super important, maybe the most important. A couple of different ways. So teaching, a big archetypal fulfillment, helping, being in service of those in need, less than you, huge fulfillment thing. Being in service of those misunderstood. That's a very unique driver I see a lot. That alternative healer, the alternative teacher. Some people have a very real thing with healing, whether it's Reiki, whether it's psychological, whether it's like more spice related, cooking related, medicinal related. That's a big driver for a lot of people, is healing, wellness. A big driver for some people is competition and conquering. So if you notice, for instance, that you always get such a high off of conquering something, you should align your job with that. Align your experiences with that. Don't fight it. Don't run from it. Just make it to where you can make money with it, versus it traveling into relationships to where you can't ever find a fulfilling, steady thing because your conquering is only able to exhibit there. Well, allow it to exhibit elsewhere, and you'll notice that your relationships become less, tumultuous, perhaps. Competition is a big driver. Bringing light to the dark is a big driver, so that you'll notice a lot of people who are very prone to conspiracy theories. You'll notice what they're really driving towards and seeking is actually to kind of save their peers. It's actually an interesting savior, well, maybe profit thing, right? Because it's like you go and you go find out the truth, and then you go when you want to bring the truth to your people. So there's a lot of beauty in that. Well, but also that isn't the most funded perspective. And sometimes that is not the most socially appropriate. Like, people don't always love that, right? But your soul loves it. You know that there's something about it that really brings you an interesting, thing. Well, that also has a foot in the door of coaching. You're wanting to bring knowledge that is not really open on the table to somebody else to allow them to have an easier experience in their existence. You don't care what they're doing with their life. You just want them to be able to do it informed, right? So even those who are really locked into conspiracy, you have to recognize that they have a savior tendency that's very fulfilling to them. They have a knowledge desire that's very fulfilling to them. And there's a natural discovery, right? That explorer, because an explorer is also first contact. There's something very like dopamine related, but also adrenaline related with that. So recognize that about yourself in that regard. For women, sometimes it's a very maternal reality that is very fulfilling. Sometimes there's a very earth related fulfillment, i.e., gardening, cooking. Cooking is a very interesting relationship as far as honoring growth, or it's kind of, I think it is more metaphysically tied than we think. Those that are earthbound have a tendency to be they have an affinity in creation of that from the earth. So, I always have a tendency, it's kind of random, but it seems non sequitur, but it is connected. Those that have a high propensity to gardening and all that, if they can't garden, someone in a apartment, most of us nowadays, they meet that same energetic need by cooking sometimes. So sometimes that's an alternative to meeting a need while you can't go and build out a half a acre garden. Some drivers have to do with animals, training of them, breeding of them. There's such a I don't know, how do you say, like a dark negative connotation around breeders, and there's a lot of reason for why they're negative, but they are also chaperones of life, because there are animal souls that intend to incarnate here, and their intention is to incarnate around human beings, just as many as there are to incarnate without them and not around them. So breeders are much more beautiful than they are negative, even when they are distorted. Because think about this. You have 7 souls that have intentions to come in as a cat, right? They might come in evolved enough to understand that they need to experience unconditional love. Well, to really experience that topic, perhaps the beginning of their existence comes from the polarity of, first off, experiencing abject apathy and abuse, right? So this soul, maybe 7 of them, however, make it in that litter, they incarnate in the absolute worst experience ever with a breeder that is ethically and consciously corrupted and it completely, I don't know how you would say, I almost want to say like poisoned. Well, they also serve a purpose, because while that origin story is that first touch, that first vibrational understanding of just greed and abuse and usage of a soul for your own gain, with like a complete lack of attention or apathy to how that might feel or what that might be experienced, right? That is the core, antithesis of love, of unconditional love. And yet, maybe that cat, that kitty, winds up being sold to the existence that is the most profoundly beautiful. Again, that's the why that we have no business trying to gauge. So, I'm not saying go forgive abusive breeders. Like, that's their own thing. They have to deal with that karma. But recognize that they are also a tool that souls of animals that intend to go and experience polarity utilize, because they're not going to come experience that through a breeder that's very sweet and kind and loving and great. They can't experience that. Now, I know there's probably a message there somewhere for us in our origin, but that's a different episode for a different time. But anywho, so my point just being, well, I guess I've kind of gone all over the world with this, but in the first meeting I had about the Dark Soul, or Dark Night of the Soul Anonymous, one of the big topics was manifestation and the way it works. So that's what I wanted to cover the most. I'll go kind of back through the main part of it, which is the soul that's right here for us. It has one job. It is to fill out the paperwork that says what is authentically, honestly, what is the nature of our reality? Do we like it? Do we not? Can we change it? Can we not? Is it, can we only change our existence by our perspective? Because maybe we make too much money. Maybe, or we can't do a divorce right now. Like, all reasons for why we can't exactly shift our physical reality. Well, that must mean that then we must shift our mental and emotional reality. Anywho, that change and the nature of that change and how it's all driven by our preferences, right? That in the scope of what is gets sent up into our higher mind, and it's their job, its job, to figure out how do we bring that forward, and why or other like why did that tragedy happen? Why did that big great thing happen? That's all of its job. So I want to, before, this has already gone too long, my bad, but I want to discuss the perspective from the higher mind, because that is where they want me to go before I end this. Okay. So now imagine you're the higher self, and time and existence and physical reality isn't made yet. It's not real in any real way, which means I, as the higher, okay, so I'm going to speak as though I'm the higher version of myself, the higher version of Sterling. Okay. So the lower version of Sterling said, and this is all hypothetical, but maybe she said, okay, in 2025, I want to change jobs and I want to find peace and stability. That is actually accurate. All right, that's what I want. Because what of my reality is, it's not as stable as I'd like. It's a little bit less peaceful than I'd like. And I'm kind of exhausted. I really don't want to go do a bunch of crazy stuff in 2025. I would just like to kind of rest a little bit and get my reality more stable. Okay. That's the what. What do I want from the future? What's happening now? I fill out that form and I send it up to the universe. What that means when I say send it up is it means that I stop expecting that I can control how it happens. That is the core about how we mess up manifestation, is we try and we fixate and we sit there in fear and we figure, I'm so afraid it won't happen that I need to control how it happens. And only through knowing how it happens can I feel safe. But that's the opposite of the physics of metaphysics. We can only bring into existence what we believe will happen, what we believe is the future, what we believe to be true. So if I'm sitting there and worrying, what that really means is I believe the worst case is going to happen. I'm trying to mitigate it. What that means is I believe the worst case is happening. That is the only thing that gets written, is what you believe can happen. So recognize that every minute, every hour, every group of 30 minutes that you spend worrying and fearing, you are spending logged in, clocked in, under the version of yourself that doesn't believe you're going to get what you say you want. That's all that is. When you worry, when you fixate, all you're doing is saying, I'm clocking under the name of I don't believe it can happen. And then I'm going to exist in that until I clock out, right? That's crazy though, because what if you just clocked in, said, this is what I want, and I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to stay clocked in. The time's still running under me saying, this is what I want. But the how and the why, I'm going to leave it to you because you're the one, the higher self, you're the only one who can do that. Who sets up synchronicity? Who sets up how you're going to meet so-and-so? Because if free will is real, if I could tomorrow say, screw all this, I actually want to become a pilot. It is true that through that pivot, that random desire, that human desire, I still get to say, hey, screw all of my contracts. I am going to go pursue a version where I'm a pilot. Well, that's what I want. Free will is allowed. The higher self, even though it might know, hey, there's 8 different contracts you're ignoring, I'm going to continue to kind of try to get you towards those and meeting them. But I have to honor what you want, which is you want to be a pilot. So I'm going to basically go into the higher form, identify what's around me temporally and spatially that can help me do that, and start to begin to get them to move towards me. That's the higher self. It's so random. It's so like not a match for my soul. But it doesn't matter because the higher self is not to judge what. It's not to judge what is good for the soul. It's to judge how I bring to you what you said you want. So you see how they're both kind of handicapped in a weird way, but together they function? I just wish that was more understood. That is a very real dance. The higher self never knows what it's doing. It just knows how to do what you want. And the version that sits down here in the physical body, it never knows how or why. It just knows what it wants. And they're both adolescent until they're put together. Then you get the full adult. Like, allow them both to be childish. Allow there to be a childish wonder around how it's going to happen. There is a faith there. It's only through that open canvas faith that our higher self has the correct tools to bring about the correct, how to get that pilot to sit next to you at that restaurant, how to get that computer to shut down on the day because it knew that for whatever reason, if you applied on a Friday instead of a Monday, you'd be accepted. But if you applied that Monday, you wouldn't. So your computer shuts down that Monday and you get disillusioned and you don't really get your life together again until that Friday where then you apply. And then because your higher self knew on that timeline, if you sent on Friday, it would become in the right eyes whenever it got viewed and you would get the job. It knew that. So what does it do? It shuts down your computer because it knows you're going to not really look at it again because you'll be so frustrated and discouraged. Well, tell me that is not divinity. Tell me that's not the divine plan that we think about when we talk about God, right? But in the moment, in our mind, in that moment, it just looks like a no. If I'm trying to apply for a job and my computer shuts down, there's part of me that's wondering, is this for me? So again, don't try to know why. You don't have the ability you don't have the tools to land on that answer unless you have intuitive leanings. And again, all that means is you're locking into, you're leaning into energy that sits outside of your own ego to get closer to what is. Because like I said, the mind that we know as our mind has no ability to quantify how or why. And the version of ourselves that knows the how or why has zero ability to construct a judgment call on why or on what, like the direction it needs to go. It can't pick a direction. It just can act on the direction that's sent up, the paperwork that's sent up, right? So they can't really function without each other, but they can't do each other's jobs. So when we think about manifestation, when we think about what we want, how we're supposed to change our reality, recognize all you have to do is be so attuned and self-aware to have a really good what. What is my reality and am I happy out with it? What do I want in my future reality? That's all you have to know. And breathe and relax under the fact that as long as you keep your eyes on what you actually want, what excites your soul, what speaks to you, and you don't concern yourself with an expected outcome of doing that or an expected experience, what will it feel like when I do it? Then you are giving your highest self 100% of the energy to go craft on your behalf. If you say, well, I want to be a painter, but I need it to make X amount of money. Now you're starting to put stipulations and you're limiting your outcomes dramatically because you think, oh, well, for me to be safe and well, I have to make this amount of money. But abundance comes in forms of ideas, gifts, synchronicities, and physical cash. So you're only focusing on one of five. And for your heart and your soul to be fulfilled, it may not come through physical hardcore cash. It might come through gifts, and the gifts might quantify themselves. Like, I'm not saying a gift like, oh, you get a coffee in the morning. I'm saying maybe the gift is so-and-so is retiring, and they're going to gift you their black book of contacts for your business, like in the industry of dog walking, because your passion is to be around animals, and you didn't require the universe to only bring you an option where that fit all of your bills. You said, bring me the option that will fulfill my soul, because guess what? Through that being met, you can't ever be destitute. You can't ever be unable to meet that need. If you're honoring your soul's vibration, the universe is required to be protective. That's the nature of it. That is the nature of why it is so detrimental to be pursuing stuff that doesn't speak to your soul, because there's no protection. There's no way that the universe can work on your behalf, because this isn't in your demographic. If my soul says my job and my existence and my pathway is here to help other people, then if I'm engaging in a job that is predatorial on people, like, I don't know, health insurance, like whatever random, it could be just something where it's like, it's not to help people, it makes its money by hurting. Maybe it's on the nose about it, maybe it's not, but like, no matter what, it's not a fit on my soul. There isn't really that much to do there. There's no energy to manipulate. Like, it's just not in my energy. It's not a match for what I'm doing. So whatever I do is free will, because frankly, it's so off of my map. I don't really get to have dominion. The more in alignment with your soul's path, the more the universe gets to move adversarial things out of your way, because you're honoring your soul's path. You're doing the one thing that we're supposed to. So it's protective to do so. One of the other reasons why when we have children for that period of time that we are their custodian, we also have a very protected path. Well, because we have to keep them safe. So, anywho, once again, I've gone very, very long, but I wanted to really just get to the meat and potatoes about manifestation and kind of covering what was said about that. I know that I'm going to go more into the nature of the separate minds, but I hope that this was effective in communicating sort of something that will allow you to at least begin the process of manifesting correctly, which is, zero connection to the outcome, full pursuance towards things that make your heart and your soul happy, right? And excited, and an awareness that we do not have any dominion over how things happen or why things have or will happen. As soon as we divorce those, like getting those minds back in their lanes, the more able we will be, like, cut through reality like a hot knife, be cut through butter. Because quite frankly, the majority of existence is not. It's not even trying to. So it isn't really like it that we have that much competition. Just lean into the arrogance, lean into, I want this. I don't really know how it's going to happen, but I want it. There's something really beautiful about that. And that is the highest form of energy you can give your higher self to go then and turn into what you want. That arrogance. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I want it. So I expect that it does. In the meantime, this is what I know I can do towards it. All right, then. Cool. That is the highest form of manifestation. It is not, well, that is the most pure and effective way. There are other ways. And, I will talk about some of the techniques, but at its core, the most potent and powerful form of manifestation is separating the minds into the what mind and living that through to the fullest degree with authentic, like real self accountability, and then understanding that the higher mind is separate. That if you want to understand the whys of things, to meditate with the intention of going into the higher self, because only then will you really get a why, and to live in accordance with your soul song without an expectation, because the expectation is the thing, the energy that messes it up. When you expect a certain vision of things, which handcuffs the higher self that says, I have to work on behalf of the what. If the requirement is this, I have to try and honor it. Well, if your requirement is that it happened by the end of March, but really it could have happened organically by the beginning of April, did you do anything authentic there? Did you do anything good for yourself there? 0%. No. So, anywho, I hope this has helped. And again, as we walk through kind of the process of 2025, a ton of this experience will have to do with getting to the core of who we are. The job of this year, the job of next year, is when you get the impulse, the data point, the feedback that this is not working, there is not a way to shove that under a rug right now. The energy sits where every single rug is pulled up, and almost to a degree, every closet is being upturned. So if you've got skeletons there, no matter how artfully you've hidden them, they're kind of creeping out right now. And that is in your benefit, because quite frankly, skeletons in closets prevent us from being fully in reality, fully in whatever we're trying to hide. In owning what we've done wrong within our own energy, we bring more of our ability to act in the future back into ourselves. So when you hold say, let's go to the extreme. Say I murdered somebody, right? Well, I'm holding up with my soul energy a reality where I didn't murder somebody. But then also I have to hold up energetically a reality where I did. So now I'm half strength no matter which version of myself I'm trying to be. Consolidate your realities. If you're lying about some dumb shit, we all have. Just stop. Let yourself, and if you can't stop, quite frankly, this is going to sound crazy. I get it. If there's some reality and lie that you've told, that the thought of going and rectifying that is too much, I hate that this is true, but it is in your energy's benefit to just cut contact, unfortunately, with the energy that you've lied to, because what you're doing is you are cutting off the necessity to uphold that reality. Is it super unfair to like your friend or your loved one? Of course it is. But it isn't like we got here by being particularly fair. Right now, what we're trying to do is consolidate our energy. Because what I promise you is, after you've cut off the reality that you're lying about, and thus through that, the people that you're lying to, you will be able to come into love with yourself, acceptance with yourself, that is much more valuable and much more vitally potent than any feedback you could get from those people that you've lied to. Because any version of that person, maybe like you've lied, it doesn't even matter what you've lied about, because when someone says, I love you, you're already saying, no, you don't. You can't love me because I'm lying about this thing and you don't know that. So you think you love me, but you don't. So you can't even accept what they have to give. So what's the cost of cutting them off is not really real cost, because after you've cut off all the realities that aren't real, after you've gotten back into alignment with what will actually make you feel good about living as yourself, living towards sort of something that has meaning, you will come to find that you have the strength to, at the least, stop lying and basically come up with a new lie that mitigates and diffuses the lie from before. I.e., for instance, like, let's give a horrible example, but say you lie about having cancer and you're ready to stop lying. That doesn't always mean that you go. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying this is energy. This is human nature. I'm not saying you have energy to go and correct that lie with everybody that you lied to, because when you told that lie, what you were trying to harvest was care and love that you weren't getting and you knew that you needed. So you crafted a way to get it. It's not right. It's arguably wrong, but it is not necessarily fundamental in the process of rectifying. So for instance, you could just go to everybody that you know and love and say, oh my gosh, I've gotten great news miraculously, or through this data, or through this blood work, whatever. I am okay again. And through that first step of walking and saying, I am okay again, you are relieving others and those around you from having to give in to you, care, concern, whatever you're essentially stealing by the lie. So again, recognize there is a pathway that's imperfect, but the path is starting with, oh, I'm better now, to then maybe in 3 years after fully being healed, going back and saying to the people you love, I'm tragically sorry. I was really broken then. I needed a lot of love. I didn't know how to ask for it. I felt really unsupported, and the only way I thought I could be supported, or the only way I thought I could deserve support, was if I had cancer. And then at 3 years from that, right, like from the day that you're making the lie to 3 years when you're owning it, you've done so much healing that you recognize, if somebody chooses to not be in my life because of that lie, that's in their right. Like, they deserve to be able to make that choice. And if they choose to not be in my life, there is a peace and a maturity and an understanding at that time. I promise, because this is my life. This is an experience I'm explaining through self-expression, something I did, in the topic being around cancer or unwellness. Sort of on the cancer level, though, right? Everyone deserves to say, I don't want to hang out with you. Like, you lied to me about having cancer. That's crazy. Like, I don't want to know you. Okay. I understand that. And I'm now at an emotional capability of handling the loss of you. So now everyone's even Stevens. I've got to deal with the loss of you, which I didn't want to / couldn't handle, whatever. That's why I lied. And I am also allowing, reintroducing, through exposing the lie, that other person's free will, the ability to choose whether they want me in their life or not, given the fact that I lied about something significant. But my point with that is that there is a process, there's steps towards that you don't have to just completely be 100% in the good, in the green, in the light, as you're trying to approach that with yourself. We get stuck in the mud. It's inevitable. Like, I don't know how else to explain existence, but human nature is not, oh, I've been sinning, I've been doing this crazy stuff, and now because of enlightenment, tomorrow I'm not. No. It's a slow process of exterminating these behaviors and these habits and these belief systems. So give yourself grace, give yourself patience, and just recognize the truth of what manifestation is and what brings it about faster, which is the removal of things that are not you, the cauterization of realities that aren't real, and the cauterization of the parts of you that say, I have to go do this 9 to 5 because I think that's what I need, even though my soul craves for me to be around children. You know what I mean? So I hope this has helped. And again, I know it kind of rambled, but take care. I hope to see you guys soon. And again, continue to send healing energies towards Terri and her shoulder. And we look forward to getting together again and being able to get on the episode with you. So take care, y'all. And again, come see me at Miracles of Joy. Go see Terri at Miracles of Joy or in Telekia. And until next time, see ya. Bye.